Hi, welcome everybody. As usual, we're going to wait just a second and let people start coming in and then but we'll get started in just a second. While people are getting settled, just a couple of things to let you all know. This is our fourth class of the going through the 2026 National Electrical Code changes, and the previous three sessions are recorded. Um, and are on our public meetings webpage. So right now, I think we've got the first two uploaded. We're working on getting the third one going. So if you missed those by for some reason, you can see them on that webpage. And we also have just other classes coming up for the DSD Info series. The one in June or May, we're going to talk about building codes, and we're going to talk about hoarding in June. So all of that's on the public meetings webpage. And then our Land Development Academy, which is geared more towards, I'd say, the development professionals. Those classes are also listed on that page. So take a look. There's stuff that happens all the time, whether it's electrical or if you're just for your personal knowledge, we've got it on there. But yeah, thanks so much. And with that, my name is Leah Adrian. I work in development services in the stakeholder and community engagement group. And today we have Marty Sterrett. He's going to go over chapter 4 of the National Electrical Code. And with that, I think my part's done. If you want to go ahead and get started, Marty, I will pass it to you.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Go ahead. Next slide, please.
I lied. It's me
Yeah.
again. So
No worries.
today, yeah, we are going to, oh goodness, hold on one second. My computer is not sharing how it needs to. Let's see. Let's try this again. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and just to follow up, we are going to have the presentation today, and then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. There is a Q&A box at the bottom if you look at your screen. If you open that, if a question pops up during the presentation and you want to drop it in there while it's fresh on your brain, please do so. We can answer it when we get to the Q&A session, or we will have an option to raise your hand and to ask it directly. And let's see now. Huh, there we go. Now,
Yeah.
now
All
for real, for
right.
real. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Leah. So good morning. I'm happy Friday. I'm Marty Sterrett, Division Manager, Commercial Building Inspections, and I'll be presenting today. A few things, if you've this is your first one you've been to, I will try to capture as many changes as I can, but I may miss a few. Will not be covering any medium voltage articles or some of the subtle changes. You will not receive any continuing education credits. This presentation is only informational. Hopefully, there'll be enough time at the end for questions or comments. I will say today is short, so we will have some time for that. For those of you who's been to the previous ones, thank you. And we've got some more coming up. I think chapter 5 is Monday, so we're going to continue this for the rest of May, except for Memorial Day. All right, next slide. So today we're going to be looking at chapter 4. This is your equipment for general use chapter. Article 402, fixture wires. So this one's 402.6 minimum size. The revision, they've added the 16 gauge solid copper clad aluminum. It's kind of the the increase of the copper clad that started in 2020, moved into 2023. So we're just continuing that. Next slide. Article 404 switches. So Article 404.1, the scope. The requirements for wiring device switches, such as single pole, three-way, and four-way snap switches, has been moved to Article 406 wiring devices. This aligns more closely with UL standards and field practices. I will say, as an electrician over the years, I was always confused why these were included in this article. But now as we're doing with most of 2026, we're putting stuff where it needs to be, and we'll talk about Article 406 here in just a second. Next slide. In Article 404.7, adjustable switches or circuit breaker exception. The new article requiring energized parts to be barriered to prevent operator exposure when making manual adjustments or switching, unless successful only to qualified persons, are located within an enclosure such that any energized parts within 6 inches of the manual adjustment or switch are covered by suitable barriers. So this would be like if you have an adjustable breaker in an enclosure. So if it's within 6 inches of the energized parts of the manual adjustment, sometimes you have to adjust these breakers. So they want to make sure that the worker is protected. Next slide. A little slight add to Article 404.10A, accessibility and grouping location. The article was relocated and revised, and it added finished grade to the measuring surfaces in maximum heights. So uh, you'll have to make sure that the grade is finished whenever you take these measurements. Next slide. Article 404.30, switch enclosures with doors. The revision requires enclosed switches with doors or hinge covers to be dead front unless access to the interior requires the use of the tool. Most of your heavy duty switches, you're already required to use a tool to open them, but there might be some general duty that you might have to watch for this particular revision. Next slide. Article 406, wiring devices. Like I said, from Article 404, this article was expanded and it was also restructured to include wiring device type switch requirements that were previously in Article 404. So now those type switches will be found in Article 406. Next slide. In Article 406.10, wiring device terminations, the revision and relocated language clarifies the permitted conductor materials for wiring devices terminations. If you've got a COARL, they are allowed to be used with copper, copper clad, and aluminum conductors. And if they are unmarked, only copper or copper clad conductors can be used on these devices. Next slide. This one, I think I like this one. 40612 D3, replacements, ground fault circuit interrupter protection. The revised article will allow for other options when applying the exception to forego providing GFCI protections. One of these is the outlet box is too small for the replacement of the same type. The marking requirement was removed to indicate the new receptacle is GFCI protected. I will also say that there may be some instance in the exception where you cannot even put in a GFCI breaker. So this exception will help if you get into some older dwelling units that were built way back that you don't have the box width to even install a GFCI receptacle on these replacements. Next slide. Article 406.14G, receptacle mounting, receptacle orientation. They've added a new list item number 3 to exclude receptacles from being mounted in the face-up position in laundry areas. So you might want to watch this, especially on these. If you're wiring one of these laundry mats, you will no longer be able to put those receptacles face up. There is, if it's kind of you got a listed assembly for that, but that might be hard to find. So I think I would probably look at making sure that the receptacles aren't mounted face up in these areas. Next slide. Article 406.16D3. We were seeing people are increasingly adding these type receptacles. So receptacle faceplate or cover plates for receptacle faceplate or cover plates with integral night lights, USB chargers, or both. The revision of this section clarifies that only unpainted or unenameled screw heads can be used for connections from the receptacle faceplate. I will say most of these faceplates are kind of the snap type. There's really not a screw involved, but if you happen to have one, it can't be. It has to be unpainted or unenameled. But I don't really see this much of an issue because, like I said, most of them are kind of a snap type cover. Next slide. Article 406.26 tamper resistant receptacle. They've expanded some requirements to include item number 11, which is park and recreation areas. The new informational note that those particular areas could be garden areas, play areas, and similar areas. So if you're doing any wiring in these particular type installations, you have to make sure that you provide the tamper resistant receptacles in those areas. Next slide. 40 Article 408 switchboard, switchgear, and panel boards. Next slide. Article 408.6 short circuit current rating. So there's new requirements for marking, documenting, and recalculating available fault current at line terminals of panel boards and switchboards for other than 1 and 2 family dwellings. Next slide. I really do like this one. Article 408.10F. That's your support and arrangement of bus bars and conductors, switchboard, switchgear, panel board identification. The revision was added to locate all caution uh, signs and labels, but be warning labels, in a readily accessible location on the front of the enclosure. I know sometimes everyone, the older ones, they might put a label inside when you open the door. They're inside, but this new article here, all your warning labels and signs are all going to have to be on the front of the enclosure. Article 409, industrial control panels. Uh, Article 409.23, sources of supply. The new article adds marking requirements for industrial control panels supplied by 50 volts or more. You will have to put a label where the disconnect is located on these industrial control panels. Next slide. Article 410, luminaires, lamp holders, and lamps. Article 410.184, GFCI, special GFCI protection. The revised section for cord connected horticulture lighting was reorganized into 2 first level subdivisions, and section B will add the use of special GFCI protections for circuits exceeding 150 volts to ground. So if you have any of these cord connected horticultural lighting, you'll probably have to uh, use special GFCI protection if it's the voltage is higher than two, or if it's like 277. Next slide. Article 422 appliances. Next slide. Article 422.12 central heating equipment exceptions number 1 and number 2. I want to specify that this is for central heating equipment. Exception 2 was added to permit the servicing receptacles required by 21063A and the lighting outlets for areas where equipment will be served required by 210.70C to be supplied from the branch circuit supplying the equipment. So now on the central heating equipment, you will be able to feed these required lights and service receptacles off the same branch circuit supplying the equipment. I like that one. Next slide. Article 422.13 storage type water heaters. Branch circuit overcurrent device was removed, as we saw in the definition of branch circuit overcurrent device. Also, in Article 240, pretty much now everything's going to be overcurrent protected device. It was removed to avoid confusion that the text only applied to branch circuits and revised to clarify that the load is considered continuous. Next slide. Article 426, fixed outdoor electric de-icing and snow melting equipment, something we see here in Austin all the time. We get a lot of snow. Article 426.2, listing requirements for conductive pavement heating system was included. This is also was a new definition for a new technology. Well, it's kind of been used up north, but so that's why they've added this listing requirements in this article. Next slide. Also, part of that conductive pavement heating equipment, part 6 was added for these particular systems. The existing part 6 that was in this article, control and protection, was moved to part 7. So we got a whole new part now for these systems. Next slide. Article 430, motor circuits and controllers. So throughout the Article 430, these design BE and design CE motors have been included throughout due to their energy efficient design. A higher lock rotor currents are allowed on these. I'm not too familiar with these. These are kind of a newer technology, but uh, they're supposedly more energy efficient. So they're including these into the Article 430. Next slide. Article 430.3, reconditioned equipment. As we've already discussed in some of the other articles, we've got some more requirements on reconditioned equipment, and such is the case in Article 430. The revision will allow reconditioned motors as long as the manufacturer instructions are followed when available, or if nationally recognized standards are used. Next slide. Article 430.98A, marking motor control centers. The revised article clarifies that motor control centers supplied by feeder must be marked with the location of the means necessary to disconnect all power to the motor control center. Article 430.32, Excuse me, I believe that should be 132. Ground fault circuit interrupter and special GFCI between power conversion equipment and motors. Ground fault circuit interrupter and special ground fault circuit interrupter shall not be installed between power conversion equipment, output terminals, and the motor. You'll have to They'll have to be installed on the line side of these. Next slide. Article 440, air condition and refrigeration equipment. Okay, so as we've discussed in other articles, dot two is our listing requirements, and there's a lot more listing requirements in the 2026 National Electric Code. This being one of them, 440.2B. This is for field installed electric heaters. So us electricians, we're going to have to get with our fellow mechanical contractors and make sure that they adhere to this. It's in our code, so it's part of our inspection, but they're the ones that usually install it. So we'll have to have some discussions with them. The new revision stating any electric heater field installed within the enclosure of listed HVAC equipment must be identified as a listed field installed accessory by the manufacturer. You're not going to be able to, uh, take another brand or whatever, install it in the equipment unless that manufacturer of that equipment says you can. So you're really going to have to pay attention to when these are field installed. Next slide. 440.11 general. The revision requires doors or covers that expose electrical parts to be locked or require a tool to be open whenever it is readily accessible to unqualified persons. I think a lot of these, there's this kind of a picture of a air conditioned pull-out type disconnect without the cover on it, but most of these now have covers. And like I said, the heavy duty disconnects, you have to have a tool. So if the door cover, if you open the door and exposed energized parts are there or not guarded, it's either going to have to be locked or it'll have to have a tool to be open. Next slide. Okay, this is a big one. I think for people that install these mini split systems, uh, a revision to add a new section for marking requirements to identify the location of all indoor units supplied by the exterior disconnect of a split system HVAC system in other than one and two family dwellings. So what that means is if on the exterior disconnect, you're going to have a label that tells the location of all the indoor units that are supplied from that exterior split system. So that's going to be a pretty big one as far as labeling requirements. Again, other than one and two family dwellings. Next slide. Generators, Article 445. 445.13, conductors, minimum ampacity and size. This revision enhances code clarity, usability, and flexibility for generator conductor sizing. You've got with overcurrent protection or without overcurrent protection. This article helps, like I said, it clarifies uh, the sizing requirements. Looks real good. Article 445.19B, emergency shutdown of prime mover, remote emergency shutdown, is pretty simple revision. That is replace the word emergency stop switch with shutdown device. These it's just a small one. You also need to make sure that either commercial or one and two family dwellings that these are marked generator emergency shutdown. Article 455 phase converters. Next slide. Another recondition equipment article that clarifies that reconditioned phase converters are prohibited from being installed. 460 capacitors, similar. Article 460.3, you're not allowed to use reconditioned capacitors. Article 480, stationary batteries. The scope, Article 480.1, revisions include removing the term standby for clarity. Informational note clarifies that Article 480 will apply to all stationary battery installations that are not listed energy storage systems. I know there's been some confusion between these two terms, but you're only going to go to Article 480 if it's not a listed energy storage system, but a stationary battery installation. Next slide. 480.8, grounding of battery stands in conductive cases. The revision clarifies outdated language by adding a clear requirement. All conductive battery racks, stands, cabinets, and cases must be grounded. Next slide. Article 480.14, overcharge control. The new article mandates overcharge prevention provisions for all stationary battery systems. The language is intentionally broad to allow flexibility across different technologies. Next slide. Article 495, equipment over 1,000 volts AC, 1,500 volts DC nominal. Like I said earlier, we will not discuss those because that's medium voltage. But if you do work in these type systems, you might want to familiarize yourself with this article. Right. And with that, that's pretty much it today. I told you it was going to be a short one.
Well, let's see. Yep. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A, or if anybody would like to raise your hand if you have questions, we have plenty of time to go through anything that you may have. And I'll go ahead and put this. There's an engagement survey on the left, and if you want to see the other classes that are coming up, there's the other one for yeah, so I'll leave that up for a minute.
Yeah, Monday we'll be looking at chapter 5. That's our hazardous and healthcare articles. So that's another one if you work in these areas.
And then there is just the website. You can, if you are not connected for building connections, we'll send this out, but we've got the building connections website, and that is a monthly newsletter, and it's specifically for development in town. But right now, still no questions. This is your time if you have anything. Otherwise, we can wrap it up early.
It'll be early Friday today.
Yes. And you don't even have to tell your bosses that you've wrapped up early. Don't tell us that. Okay, well, thank you all for attending. Again, we're going to have this, it'll be put up on our website on the public meetings page. So again, if you have a colleague that wasn't able to make it, we welcome you to do that. But thank you again for attending, and hopefully we will see you next week. Thanks so much. Thanks, Marty.
All right. Have a good day. Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.